In the heart of Atlanta, Georgia, a city alive with diversity and dreams, an unexpected love story was about to unfold. Alden had always lived a comfortable life, growing up in a supportive family in the suburbs just north of the city. He was a hard-working young man with bright hazel eyes and a kind smile, known for his gentle nature. At 29 years old, he had a stable job in a downtown Atlanta tech firm and a close-knit group of friends. Yet, for all his success on paper, something was missing from Alden's life. A deeper purpose, and the kind of love that truly transforms a person. On the other side of town, Ayanna was doing her best to raise her 3 young children. At 28, Ayanna was a single mother to 3 kids. Zion, who was 12, Nyla, who was 9, and Omari, who was 6. Life had not been easy for Ayanna. She had married young, only to have her marriage fall apart, leaving her to care for her children alone. Despite the hardships, Ayanna remained resilient and loving. She worked 2 jobs, as a daytime receptionist and an evening waitress, to make ends meet, all while making time to help with homework and tuck her kids into bed each night. Her days were long and tiring, but she greeted every morning with hope for a better future for her family. One balmy summer evening, Alden stepped into a small family-run diner on the outskirts of downtown Atlanta, as he often did after long workdays. The bell above the door jingled softly, and the aroma of coffee and fried chicken filled the air. Ayanna, working the late shift, greeted him with a tired but genuine smile. She recognized Alden. He was a regular who came in a few times a week, and she always appreciated his polite manners and the way his eyes warmed when he smiled back. Ayanna had a way of bringing light into the diner along with her. The harsh fluorescent lights overhead did little to flatter anyone, but Alden thought Ayanna managed to glow regardless. Her dark curls were always neatly pulled back, and a few wisps framed her gentle face. She wore the simple blue diner uniform, but carried herself with a quiet grace that set her apart. Perhaps it was the warmth in her brown eyes or the genuine interest she showed. In everyone she spoke to, whatever it was, Alden found himself drawn to it. For Alden, these evening stops at the diner had become more than just grabbing a meal. They were the highlight of his day. He often caught himself anticipating their brief chats, wondering what new stories or jokes Ayanna might share. Sometimes he'd walk in tired and discouraged from a long day, but leave with a lighter heart after even a short conversation with her. In those moments, the bustling city outside felt a bit less lonely. "Good evening, welcome back," Ayanna said, handing him a menu, although she already knew he often ordered the same chicken sandwich and sweet tea. "Hi, Ayanna," Alden replied, reading her name off the brass name tag pinned to her neatly pressed apron. He had learned her name and liked the sound of it. "Busy night?" he asked kindly, noticing the slight weariness in her posture. Ayanna let out a soft chuckle and shrugged. "It's been steady, can't complain. At least it makes the shift go faster," she said, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Despite the fatigue that tugged at her edges, she maintained a warm demeanor. As Ayanna took his order and disappeared into the kitchen, Alden found himself admiring her strength. Over the past few months, their brief conversations had grown a little longer each time. Alden had noticed that after serving all her customers and cleaning up, she would often pull out some paperwork or a notepad during slow moments. One evening, he finally got the courage to ask about it. On that particular night, after finishing his meal, Alden noticed Ayanna at the counter, frowning in concentration at a crumpled worksheet under the neon light. The diner was nearly empty now. Summoning a bit of courage, Alden approached the counter as he paid his bill. "Everything okay?" he asked gently, nodding at the papers she was reviewing. Ayanna looked up, a little startled, then gave a weary smile. "Oh yes, sorry, I'm just checking my son's homework. He's struggling a bit with math, and I try to go over it during my break," she explained. In that moment, she seemed more vulnerable. Not just a friendly waitress, but a mother concerned about her children. Alden's eyes softened. "You have a son?" he asked, though he realized immediately she must have family responsibilities given the hints. The tired eyes the wedding band tan line on her finger, even though she wore no ring, and now the homework. "I have 3 kids, actually," Ayana replied, with a mix of pride and exhaustion in her tone. "Zion's 12, Nyla is 9, and my little one, Omari, is 6. As she spoke their names, her face lit up with love despite the fatigue. She pulled out her phone and showed him a photo of 3 smiling children hugging their mum. "They're my world," she added softly. Alden took a moment to look at the photo. The kids looked happy and well, cared for, and Ayana's arms were wrapped around them in a big family hug. He felt a warm admiration. "They're beautiful," he said sincerely. "You must be very proud." Ayana nodded, a soft smile on her lips. "I am. They're good kids. They keep me going." She hesitated, then added, "It's not easy doing it by myself, but we manage." There was a mixture of determination and vulnerability in her voice that tugged at Alden's heart. He felt an urge to know more, but didn't want to pry. Still, his curiosity and concern overcame his shyness. Do you have any help at home?" he asked gently, unsure if that was too personal. It must be tough working so much and looking after them. Ayana sighed and glanced down at the worksheet, tracing a finger along a child's messy math problem. "Their father isn't in the picture," she said quietly. She didn't elaborate, and Alden didn't push for details. He could sense a hint of pain there. "I'm sorry," Alden offered softly. After a pause, he added, "For what it's worth, I think it's amazing what you do for them. I can barely take care of myself, and you're supporting 3 kids." He gave a little laugh, trying to lighten the mood, but meaning every word. Ayana's eyes met his, and she was surprised to find genuine respect there. Many customers didn't bother to see her as anything beyond a server with a name tag. Alden's kindness was refreshing. "Thank you," she said, and there was real gratitude in her voice. In a quieter tone, she added, almost to herself, "I don't hear that often." They shared a warm smile, and Alden felt a spark of connection. On an impulse, he nodded toward the homework sheet. "I actually majored in engineering," he said lightly. "I deal with numbers all day. If you ever need a hand with the math problems, I'd be happy to help." He immediately hoped he hadn't overstepped, but the offer came from a good place. Ayana looked at him with surprise, then relief. It had been ages since someone offered her help without strings attached. "That's really kind of you," she said, a bit shyly. "Maybe I could bring in one of Zion's worksheets sometime, if you really wouldn't mind." "I wouldn't mind at all," Alden assured. He realized he was actually looking forward to it. There was something about Ayana, her strength, her devotion to her children, her warmth, that drew him in. As he left the diner that night, he found himself smiling more than usual. The city lights of Atlanta shimmered as he drove home, and for the first time in a while, Alden felt like he had something to look forward to beyond the routine of work and home. Welcome back to Mr. Roman's Story Vault, where every story reminds you that real love still exists. If you believe second chances can rebuild lives, take a second to hit subscribe. Tap the like button so this story reaches more people who need hope today. And tell me in the comments, what's your first impression of Alden and Ayana? Should a man risk everything for love, or take the safe route? I'd love to know what you think before this story unfolds. Over the next few weeks, Alden found himself stopping by the diner more frequently. True to his word, he spent a few evenings after his meal going over math problems for Zion with Ayana. They would spread out the worksheets on a corner table once the dinner rush died down. Alden explained concepts patiently, jotting down tips on scrap paper, while Ayana listened intently so she could help her son later. Their conversations also grew more personal during those quiet moments. Alden learned that Ayana had grown up in Atlanta as well, but her life had been vastly different from his. Where Alden's upbringing in a comfortable suburb was filled with stability, Ayana's was marked by early responsibility. She had her first child, Zion, at only 16 and had married her high school sweetheart. But that youthful romance ended in heartbreak when her husband left the family a few years later. Since then, Ayana had been on her own with the kids. As she spoke about her past, Ayana's voice held no self-pity, only determination to give her children a good life despite everything. In return, Alden shared pieces of his own life. He had gone to college on a scholarship, built a career in software development, but admitted that he sometimes felt lonely coming home to an empty apartment. He had dated a little, but nothing serious had ever come of it. He was holding out for a meaningful connection. Ayana listened with a sympathetic ear, occasionally offering a kind smile or a word of understanding. One rainy night, as the diner closed up, Alden noticed Ayana peering out at the thunderstorm drenching the streets. She mentioned that her aging car had finally broken down for good last week, and she'd been taking the bus until she could afford repairs. Alden could see the worry in her eyes. It was late, and the buses were slow at this hour. Without hesitation, he offered her a ride home. At first, Ayana was hesitant. She had always been independent, and she didn't want to be a burden or overstep boundaries. But the rain was coming down in sheets, and the thought of getting home an hour late to relieve the babysitter weighed on her. She finally agreed, and together they dashed through the downpour to Alden's car. During the drive, the city lights blurred by in streams of gold and red against the rain-streaked windows. In the cozy shelter of the car, they talked more freely than ever. Ayana gave directions to her neighborhood, apologizing for the distance, but Alden didn't mind at all. In fact, he found he enjoyed the easy conversation and the chance to help. When they arrived at Ayana's small home in a modest neighborhood, the porch light was on. A neighbor who had been watching the kids hurried out once Ayana was home, and through the open door, Alden caught a glimpse of the children peeking curiously from behind the living room curtains. "Thank you so much, Alden," Ayana said, turning to him before stepping out into the rain again under the shelter of an umbrella he loaned her. "Would you like to come in for a moment, just to get out of the rain before you head back?" She offered, a bit nervously. Part of her was concerned about what her kids would think, but another part knew that Alden had earned her trust. Alden smiled but shook his head gently. It was late, and he didn't want to intrude on her family's evening routine. "I appreciate it, but I should get going. I'll see you soon, though," he said. He did, however, lean a little to wave at the small faces now peering through the doorway. "Good night," he called softly. He saw two little hands wave back before giggling and ducking behind the doorframe. Driving home that night, Alden felt warmth blooming in his chest. He realized that in getting to know Ayana and her children, even just briefly, seeing them, he felt more alive and connected than he had in a long time. Ayana, too, as she closed the door and dried off the kids' curious faces, found herself smiling. She said a silent prayer of thanks for the unexpected kindness that had come into her life in the form of Alden. A couple of weekends later, Alden invited Ayana and the kids for a day out in the city. At first, Ayana was unsure. She hadn't been on an outing with a man in years, and certainly not with her children involved. But Alden's genuine enthusiasm and the way the kids' eyes lit up at the mention of the zoo and a picnic at Piedmont Park convinced her. It was a beautiful Saturday when they all met up at the zoo's entrance, the summer sun filtering through the trees. Zion, the oldest, stood protectively close to his mum, eyeing Alden with cautious curiosity. Nyla, the 9-year-old, clutched her little brother Omari's hand, both of them bouncing with excitement at the prospect of seeing elephants and lions. Ayana greeted Alden with a warm smile, and he noticed she had dressed up a little, a pretty yellow sundress replacing her usual work uniform. He, too, had traded his office attire for casual jeans and a polo shirt. They looked like a family of friends enjoying a summer day, even if it was all new territory. Inside the zoo, any initial awkwardness began to melt away. Alden made sure each child got to see their favorite animals. He hoisted little Omari onto his shoulders so the boy could get a better view of the towering giraffes, making the 6-year-old squeal with delight. When Zion hung back quietly, Alden engaged him by asking thoughtful questions about the animals, discovering that Zion was especially interested in the reptile house. Soon they were chatting about snakes and lizards, and Zion's wariness eased into a shy enthusiasm. Nyla, initially clinging to her mother's side, giggled when Alden bought her an ice cream and playfully pretended to steal a bite. Ayana watched these interactions with a full heart. It was rare to see her children bond so quickly with anyone new. After a fun-filled morning at the zoo, the group headed to Piedmont Park for a picnic lunch that Alden had prepared. He surprised them with a picnic basket full of sandwiches, fruit, and homemade cookies he'd baked himself. They found a shady spot on the grass overlooking the sparkling lake. As the kids played tag under the trees, Alden and Ayana sat on the blanket, chatting and laughing easily. It felt comfortable, as if they'd all known each other longer than just a couple of months. At one point, Nyla ran back to the blanket to grab a juice box and, with the innocent bluntness of a child, looked at Alden, then her mom. "Mr. Alden, do you like my mummy?" she asked, tilting her head curiously. Ayana's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Alden paused, taken aback for a second by the direct question, then answered sincerely, "I do. I like your mummy very much. She's a wonderful person." Ayana, still blushing, gently shooed her daughter. "All right, Nyla, that's enough questions, honey. Go play with your brothers." But as Nyla skipped away grinning, Ayana and Alden exchanged a glance. Both of them smiled, hearts fluttering at the unspoken truth hanging in the air. There was something real growing between them. By the end of that day, the bond between Alden and Ayana's family had deepened considerably. When Alden dropped them all off at home, Omari insisted on giving him a hug goodbye, wrapping his tiny arms around Alden's leg. Zion, no longer hiding behind a tough front, gave a shy smile and said, "Thanks, that was fun." And Nyla asked hopefully if Mr. Alden would come again to visit. Ayana stood by watching her children with a heart full of emotion. Alden had seamlessly begun to fit into their lives, and as she met his warm gaze over the heads of her children, she realized how much she hoped he would stay in their lives. As the months passed, Alden and Ayana's relationship blossomed from friendship into a deep romance. With each passing week, they grew closer. Alden became a regular presence at Ayana's home, helping Zion with homework, reading bedtime, stories to little Omari, or watching movies with Nyla and the family on Friday nights. In those cozy evenings on the couch, with a child curled up on either side of him and Ayana. As hand in his, Alden found a sense of belonging he never realized he craved so much. For Ayana, having Alden in her life felt like a blessing she hardly dared dream about. He was patient and kind, not just to her, but to her children. She found herself falling in love with the way he would tie Omari's shoelaces and carry him on his shoulders, or how he encouraged Nyla's budding interest in art by bringing her sketchbooks and colored pencils. He treated Zion with respect, giving the growing boy guidance without overstepping, slowly becoming the role model and father figure Zion needed. And in quiet moments after the kids were asleep, Alden and Ayana would sit together on the porch swing, enjoying the warm Georgia night air, talking about everything and nothing. Under the soft glow of the porch light, those conversations often ended in gentle kisses and whispered promises. One such evening, as a warm breeze rustled through the magnolia trees and the distant twinkle of Atlanta's skyline lit the horizon, Alden gently took Ayana's hands in his. His heart pounded with both nerves and conviction. "Ayana, I have to tell you something," he murmured, gazing into her deep brown eyes. "These past months with you and the kids, they've been the happiest of my life. I never thought I'd find someone like you. I love you." It was the first time he had spoken those 3 words aloud, and they hung in the air like a sweet refrain. Ayana's breath caught. In the soft glow of the porch light, tears of joy welled up in her eyes. "I love you too, Alden," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. Hearing those words, Alden felt a surge of elation. He cupped her cheek and leaned in, and under the canopy of the starry night, they shared their first truly passionate kiss, a tender, heartfelt kiss that sealed the promise of their future. From that moment on, they both knew that whatever challenges came their way, they would face them side by side. Alden also made sure to spend time with Ayana one-on-one, knowing that she rarely did anything for herself. One Saturday, he arranged for a trusted babysitter, with Ayana's cautious approval, and took her out to a nice restaurant in Midtown. her first real date night in years. Ayana was nervous at first to leave the kids, but as they dined by candlelight and shared heartfelt conversation free of interruptions, she felt herself relax and glow in Alden's company. It was on one such evening, strolling hand in hand along the Atlanta skyline after dinner, that Alden realized he wanted to spend the rest of his life with Ayana and her children. A few months later, on a crisp autumn morning beneath the golden-red leaves of Piedmont Park, the site of their first outing together, Alden proposed to Ayana. He had set up a family picnic under the guise of celebrating Ayana's birthday. When she arrived, she found the kids wearing T-shirts that each had a word spelled out, "Will you marry?" and Alden held the last one, hidden until the perfect moment, which read Mom. Ayana gasped, tears welling in her eyes, as she read the message formed by her 3 giggling children. Alden went down on one knee, holding out a simple but elegant ring. "Ayana, you and the kids have become the most important part of my life. I love you, and I love them. Will you marry me? Will you let me be a husband to you and a father to them?" His voice trembled with emotion as he spoke. Ayana could barely speak through her tears of joy. She nodded, a radiant smile breaking through, and finally managed to exclaim, "Yes, yes, of course I will." The children cheered, and little Omari jumped up and down, not fully understanding everything but excited by everyone's happiness. In that moment, under the bright morning sun and amidst the laughter and hugs, they became a family in their hearts. However, not everyone in Alden's life was thrilled with his decision to marry Ayana. When he shared the news of his engagement with his friends and family, he was met with a range of reactions, many of them far from supportive. One evening, Alden met 2 of his close friends from college, Bryce and Jonah, at a local sports bar to catch up. With a nervous smile, he announced that he was going to marry Ayana, the woman they had heard him talk about. Bryce nearly choked on his drink in surprise. "Marry? Dude, are you serious?" he blurted out, eyebrows raised. Jonah gave a slow nod, trying to be happy for his friend. "Wow, Alden, that's big news. If you're happy, I'm happy for you," Jonah offered sincerely, though his voice had uncertainty. Bryce, however, was less tactful. He let out a disbelieving chuckle. "I mean, come on, man. You're really going to settle down with a single mom of 3 kids? You're what, 30? You have no idea what you're signing up for. Most guys like us are just starting to think about maybe having 1 kid, and you're jumping into instant fatherhood of 3? Why would you do that to yourself?" He said it with a grin, as if it were a joke, but there was a harsh edge to his words. Alden felt his jaw tighten. "Because I love her, Bryce," he said firmly. "I love all of them. Ayana and the kids are the best thing that ever happened to me." His voice was calm but resolute, leaving no doubt that he meant it. Bryce shook his head, still incredulous. "Man, love is one thing, but think practically. You're going to be playing dad to someone else's kids. What about their real father? You think he's just going to be cool with this? And what do? You know about raising kids. Our lives are going to be totally different now. No more spontaneous guys' trips or late-night hangouts. You'll be changing diapers and going to school plays." He let out a short laugh, as if the thought were ridiculous. Jonah elbowed Bryce, muttering, "Hey, give it a rest." Jonah then turned to Alden. "Ignore him. If Ayana makes you happy, then I'm happy for you. I haven't met her yet, but I can tell she means a lot to you. Just make sure you know what you're doing, all right?" Bryce swirled his drink and added one more jab. "All I'm saying is, this isn't exactly what we pictured for you. We all thought you'd end up with someone with a similar background, you know? Not this scenario. But hey, it's your life." He raised his glass in a half-mocking toast. To Alden and his ready-made family, he said, "A couple of other acquaintances." At the table, chuckling under their breath as they clinked glasses. Alden forced a polite smile, but inside he felt hurt and angry at the dismissive way they spoke about Ayana and the children. That night, he left the bar earlier than usual, making an excuse about an early morning. Driving home, he reflected on how some of his friends viewed his relationship. It only strengthened his resolve to prove them wrong. His family's reaction was similarly skeptical. Alden arranged a dinner at his parents' house to introduce Ayana not long after the engagement. Ayana was nervous about meeting them, acutely aware that their backgrounds were very different. She left the children with her sister for the evening, wanting to make the first meeting with Alden's parents a bit simpler. At the dinner, Alden's mother, Margaret, greeted Ayana politely but with thinly veiled surprise. His father, Charles, was courteous but reserved. Over appetizers in the formal dining room, the conversation was stilted. Margaret asked Ayana about her work and background, nodding with a tight smile as Ayana explained her jobs and mentioned her children. Charles's eyebrows rose slightly at the mention of 3 kids, although he said nothing at first. After dinner, when Ayana stepped into the kitchen with Margaret to help with the dishes, despite Margaret's protests, Charles pulled Alden aside in the study. His father's tone was low and serious. "Son, are you absolutely sure about this?" Charles asked, concern evident in his eyes. "Marriage is a big step, and with her circumstances, it's going to be even more complicated. You're a young man with a promising future. I just want to make sure you've thought this through." Alden felt a flash of frustration. "Dad, I've never been more sure of anything. I love Ayana. I love her children. I know it won't be easy, but we'll figure it out together. We want your support. But even if you don't give it, I'm going to marry her." His voice was respectful but unwavering. Charles sighed deeply, running a hand through his graying hair. "It's not that we don't want you to be happy, Alden. We just worry. You come from a different world than she does, and raising someone else's children. Are you ready for that responsibility? Think of the challenges, financial burdens, possibly dealing with their biological father, societal differences," he trailed off. But Alden understood the unspoken reference to race, and to how some people might view a mixed family. Alden squared his shoulders. "I am ready. And those kids might not be mine by blood, but in my heart, they're already like my own. As for the rest, yes, we'll have challenges, but every marriage does. We love each other, and that's what matters." Margaret and Ayana emerged from the kitchen, and Margaret forced a pleasant smile as she joined the conversation. She offered dessert and coffee, trying to maintain civility. But Ayana could feel the tension in the air and the subtle disapproval behind the older couple's eyes. On the drive home, she fought back tears, worried that she might drive a wedge between Alden and his family. Sensing her unease, Alden reached over and squeezed Ayana's hand gently. "Don't worry," he said softly, as the streetlights flashed across the windshield. "They'll come around. They just need time. I'm sorry if you felt uncomfortable. I love you, and nothing is going to change my mind." Ayana managed a small smile, leaning her head against his shoulder for a moment as he drove. "I love you too, Alden," she whispered. Despite her worries, his steadfast support made her feel secure. They both hoped that, in time, others would see the love they shared and accept their unconventional family. On a bright winter afternoon, Alden and Ayana were married in a small church on the outskirts of Atlanta. It was an intimate ceremony. Ayana's sister and a few close friends were there, along with Alden's parents, a handful of relatives, and a couple of his buddies. As Ayana walked down the aisle in a simple ivory gown, Alden thought, she looked absolutely breathtaking, a vision of grace and hope. Her sister walked beside her as matron of honor, and Ayana's heart pounded with a mix of nervousness and joy. She caught a glimpse of a few curious or hesitant faces in the pews, but then her eyes locked with Alden's at the altar, and everything else faded away. In Alden's gaze, she saw pure love and reassurance. Nyla scattered flower petals in front of her mother with a serious, focused expression, while Omari clutched the ring pillow tightly, taking his job as ring-bearer with utmost importance. Zion walked just ahead of them, chin up, holding a "Here Comes Mummy" sign that made Ayana laugh through her tears. The sight of her children paving the way and her future husband waiting, with devotion, painted a picture almost too beautiful to bear. Ayana felt a surge of gratitude for second chances at love, for family, and for the man who accepted all of her. By the time she reached Alden's side, any lingering fears had dissolved, replaced by the certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Yet, Even on this special day, not all the smiles were sincere. Among the guests, a few whispers could be heard. One of Alden's cousins raised an eyebrow at the sight of the 3 children accompanying the bride. A distant aunt murmured, "Well, this is certainly different," to her neighbor, and the two exchanged a quiet chuckle. Alden tried to ignore these murmurs as he focused on Ayana, who approached him with tears of joy brimming in her eyes. The couple exchanged heartfelt vows, promising to love and cherish each other and the children they would raise together. There were sniffles from some moved guests. Ayana's sister was openly crying with happiness. However, a few of Alden's friends at the back of the church smirked during the vows about raising the children. Bryce, who had reluctantly shown up, whispered under his breath to another friend, "He's crazy, signing up for all that." The two quietly laughed, thinking no one heard them. After the ceremony, there was a small reception in the church hall. While Alden and Ayana shared their first dance as husband and wife, with the kids joyfully joining in halfway through, not everyone present shared their joy. At a corner table, 2 of Alden's distant relatives were gossiping. "I give it a year," one man said with a cynical snort, sipping punch. "He'll be overwhelmed and regret this. Just watch." Another guest nodded, responding in a low tone, 3 kids that Aaron, to his, and, they come from a different background. These things don't end well. Their wives tutted in agreement. Alden's parents tried to put on brave faces. Margaret managed polite smiles throughout, and Charles shook Alden's hand with a stiff hug after the ceremony, but Alden could sense their lingering reservations. They weren't laughing or gossiping like some others, but in their restrained congratulations he could tell they still harbored doubts. Despite the murmurs and snickers, Alden and Ayana were radiantly happy. As they departed the reception, ready to start their new life together, they drove off with the kids in the back seat, tin cans rattling behind their car and "just married" scrawled on the back window. Ayana held Alden's hand tightly, determined to focus on the man she loved and the family they were forming, rather than the people who couldn't understand their love. Alden glanced in the rearview mirror at Zion, Nyla, and Omari, his heart swelled knowing these were now his kids in every way that mattered. Let them laugh if they want, he thought. We'll show them with our happiness and success. The first year of marriage brought its share of challenges for Alden and Ayana. Blending into a new family was a learning curve for everyone. They moved into a modest 3-bedroom house in a family-friendly Atlanta neighborhood, one that meant a longer commute for Alden but gave the kids a yard to play in and decent schools nearby. Even with Alden's solid income and careful budgeting, money was tighter now with 5 mouths to feed. Ayana cut back her hours at the diner so she could be home in the evenings with the kids, and Alden happily took on more financial responsibility. Still, there were nights they sat at the kitchen table after the children were asleep, poring over bills and paychecks, making sure they could cover everything. It was stressful, but they tackled it together, determined to build a stable life for their children. Emotionally, the family was still finding its rhythm. The children adored Alden, but moments of adjustment were inevitable. One evening, 13-year-old Zion came home fuming after an argument at school and snapped at Ayana. When Alden gently told him not to speak rudely to his mother, Zion exploded, "You're not my real dad! You can't tell me what to do." The hurtful words hung in the air. Zion fled to his room and slammed the door, leaving Alden standing there, heart aching. Later that night, after tempers cooled, Alden knocked on Zion's door and entered softly. He found the boy crying into his pillow. Sitting down next to him, Alden spoke in a calm, steady voice. "You're right, Zion. I'm not your father by blood," he said, rubbing the boy's back gently. "I'm still learning how to do this. But I want you to know that I love you. I will never try to replace your dad, but I promise I will always be here for you no matter what." Zion wiped his eyes, his anger spent and now replaced with guilt. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. "I didn't mean it. I miss having a dad around. And sometimes I get scared you'll leave us too." The vulnerability in the boy's voice was raw. Alden felt tears in his own eyes. I'm not going anywhere, he said softly, pulling Zion into a hug. At first the boy tensed, but then he melted into his stepfather's embrace. I love you, kiddo. I chose you and your mom and brother and sister to be my family. That's forever. From that night on, Zion's walls began to truly come down. The teenager started to confide in Alden more, asking him for advice, with school projects or talking about his favorite basketball team. The words, "You're not my dad," were never uttered again in the house. Instead, about a year later, Alden's heart nearly burst the first time Zion slipped and called him dad while excitedly showing him a good grade on a math test. Alden pretended not to notice the word to avoid embarrassing him, but that night, he told Ayanna, and they shared tears of happiness at how far they had all come. Not all trials were within the family. One afternoon, about a year into the marriage, Ayanna's ex-husband unexpectedly showed up at their doorstep. It was the first time in years he had made any attempt to see the children. The encounter was tense. Derek, the biological father, had heard through acquaintances that Ayanna had remarried and, perhaps out of pride or regret, decided to barge back into their lives unannounced. The kids reacted with confusion and anxiety. They barely remembered him, except Zion, who stood protectively in front of Nyla and Omari. Alden stepped forward calmly, placing himself slightly in front of Ayanna and the children. "Why are you here?" he asked in a firm, steady tone. Derek, a bit disheveled and smelling of alcohol, sneered, "I came to see my kids." "Don't I have a right to do that?" "Who the heck are you?" "Oh right, the replacement." He let out a bitter laugh. Ayanna's face hardened. She remembered all the nights waiting for Derek to come home, and then the endless months of him not coming back at all. "Derek, you can't just show up out of nowhere and upset them," she said, trying to keep her voice steady for the kids' sake. "You haven't been here. This is not their fault, but you can't expect to drop in and play father now." Derek bristled, raising his voice. "They are my blood. You think this pretty boy can take my place?" He stepped toward Alden aggressively. For a moment, Alden's heart pounded, not out of fear for himself, but concern for the kids who huddled near their mother. Alden held up a hand and spoke evenly. "The children have a father. It's the one who's been here raising them. You walked away, Derek. If you truly care about them, you'd put their peace first and not frighten them by showing up like this." Derek looked ready to argue or even lash out, but just then Zion stepped forward, voice shaking with anger and bravery. "Just go!" the boy shouted at his biological father, eyes full of tears. "We don't need you. We have Dad now," he added, reaching for Alden's hand. At that word, Dad, Alden felt a swell of emotion. Derek stood there, stunned into silence. Perhaps he realized for the first time what his absence had cost him. Let's pause right there, if that moment touched your heart. Like this video, and share it with someone who's ever had to rebuild a family from broken pieces. That simple act helps this story reach more people who need a reminder that love can heal anything. Tell me in the comments, what did you feel when Zion said those words? Strength, forgiveness, hope. Your voice matters here. Grumbling, Derek backed off, muttering curses under his breath as he retreated down the driveway. Alden immediately gathered the children in a comforting embrace as Ayanna shut the door firmly. She trembled slightly from the confrontation, but when she looked at Alden, comforting Zion, Nyla, and Omari, her heart filled with gratitude. They had weathered yet another storm together. As the years went by, hard work and love turned their modest beginnings into a story of success. Alden excelled at work. His bosses noticed his dedication and leadership, and he climbed the ranks at the tech firm, eventually becoming a project manager. The increased salary, coupled with careful saving, allowed the family to move out of their starter house into a larger home in a good neighborhood by their 5th anniversary. Ayanna, no longer exhausted from juggling 2 jobs, found time to pursue her passion for baking. With Alden's encouragement, she started a small home-based bakery business, famous in the neighborhood for her delicious peach cobbler and red velvet cupcakes. Her weekend bake sales at the local farmers market became a hit, even landing her a feature. Article in an Atlanta lifestyle magazine highlighting successful momtrepreneurs. Their family also grew in love. A couple of years into their marriage, Ayanna gave birth to a baby girl whom they named Nova, a name symbolizing the bright new light in their lives. Nova's arrival brought even more joy and cemented the blended family together. Zion, Nyla, and Omari adored their little sister and doted on her. For Alden's parents, Nova was their biological grandchild, and her birth became a turning point. Margaret and Charles began visiting more often, initially to see Nova. But gradually they formed bonds with Zion, Nyla, and Omari as well. One afternoon, Margaret found herself baking cookies with Nyla and laughing, realizing with a pang of regret how much precious time she had lost by keeping her distance at first. Charles took Zion and Omari fishing, and watching the boys excitedly reel in their first catches, he quietly admitted to himself that Alden had been right all along. These children were every bit his grandchildren too, blood or not. Together, Alden and Ayanna also gave back to their community. Remembering her own past struggles, Ayanna organized a monthly support group for single mothers in their area, offering both practical help and emotional support. Alden often joined in to provide free tutoring sessions to the kids who came along, or to fix computers and appliances for families who couldn't afford repairs. The local community center recognized their efforts with a Family of the Year award at a city event, celebrating how the Stantons, as Ayanna and the kids now proudly shared Alden's last name, exemplified love, resilience, and community spirit. A photo of the smiling family holding their award, Alden with his arm around Ayanna, Zion, and Nyla on either side. Omari holding the plaque proudly and little Nova in her mother's arms, was printed in the local newspaper. As the Stanton family flourished, those who had once laughed or doubted began to realize how wrong they had been. One by one, they came face to face with their own misjudgments. Late one evening, Bryce sat scrolling through his social media feed when he came across a photo from the local news. It was Alden and Ayanna's family receiving their Family of the Year award. There was Alden, looking confident and content, surrounded by a beaming wife and smiling kids. Bryce's mouth fell open slightly. It had been years since he'd really spoken to Alden. After the wedding, their friendship had cooled as their lives diverged. Bryce had continued his bachelor lifestyle, only to end up feeling strangely empty as he reached his mid-30s. Seeing the joy on Alden's face in that photo, Bryce felt a twist of regret in his gut. He remembered scoffing at Alden's marriage years ago, joking that it wouldn't last. Now, it was painfully clear how misplaced his laughter had been. For a long moment, Bryce stared at the picture. The caption praised the Stanton family for their contributions to the community and spoke of their love and unity. He thought about his own life, the string of short-lived relationships, the quiet of his apartment when he came home from work each day. A feeling of remorse washed over him. That night he sent Alden a message, congratulating him on the award and apologizing for not having been supportive back then. Alden, ever gracious, replied with warmth, inviting Bryce to come by for a barbecue sometime to reconnect. Bryce vowed he would. Similarly, one of Alden's relatives, Uncle Richard, who had once cynically wagered that the marriage wouldn't last, found himself eating his words. His own marriage, which he'd thought was rock solid, had hit the rocks a few years after Alden's wedding. Now divorced and living alone, Richard heard from Charles about how well Alden and Ayanna were doing. At a family gathering, Richard finally met Ayanna and the children properly. He watched as Nyla politely offered him a slice of homemade pie, and as Omari excitedly told him about a school project. He saw how happy and well-behaved the kids were, how respectfully they treated Alden as their father. Guilt prickled in Richard's chest. When Alden stepped outside to grill burgers, Richard quietly joined him. Clearing his throat, Richard said, "I owe you an apology, Alden." Alden looked at him in surprise. "Back when you got married, I was one of those who doubted you. I might even have joked that you were making a mistake. I see now how wrong I was. You've built something beautiful here, a real family. I'm sorry for not believing in you." Alden paused, then smiled and shook his uncle's hand. which turned into a friendly pat on the back. "Thank you, that means a lot," he replied. There was no resentment in his voice. Life had turned out too well to hold grudges. "I'm glad you're here with us now." Richard nodded, relieved, and spent the rest of the afternoon engaged with the family, feeling a sense of kinship he'd missed out on at the beginning. As for Alden's parents, their initial doubts had long melted away, replaced by pride and love. One Thanksgiving, as the whole extended family gathered around the table. At Alden and Ayana's home, Charles stood up to carve the turkey. Before he began, he cleared his throat. "I'd like to say something," he announced. The room grew quiet. "I want to express how thankful Margaret and I are for this family. Alden, you chose a wonderful woman and took on 3 wonderful kids. Ayana, you've been a blessing to our family. Watching you raise these children, together, and seeing how happy you all are. It's the best thing parents could hope for their son. I'll be honest, I didn't see it at first. I was worried. But I was wrong. We were wrong." His voice wavered slightly, emotion creeping in. "Seeing what a loving home you've all made has been one of the great joys of our lives. We're so proud of you." Tears shone in Ayana's eyes at these words, and Alden got up to hug his father, both men filled with gratitude and understanding. The once skeptical Margaret clinked her glass and added with a warm smile, "Hear, hear," sealing the sentiment. In that moment, any remaining shadows of doubt or disapproval were banished, replaced by the bright light of a family's love. In the end, the scornful laughter from years before had long faded, replaced by admiration and respect for what Alden and Ayana built. Their journey proves that love, resilience, and kindness can overcome prejudice and doubt. The very people who once laughed had learned their lesson, and the couple at the center of it all continued to live out their happily ever after, together with a beautiful family and hearts full of love. Thank you for watching till the end. If Alden and Ayana's journey gave you hope, hit like and subscribe for more true-to-life storytelling. Share this video with someone who believes love can overcome judgment. And, before you go, drop your biggest takeaway below. Was it patience, family, forgiveness, or faith? I read every comment, and your words help shape the next story. See you in the next one, where love and life meet again.